On May 12, 2022, hikers stumbled upon heavily decomposed human remains in a wooded area of North Carolina. The victim was a white woman, estimated to be between 20 and 40 years old, wearing only underwear. No missing person reports matched her description in the region. Instead of a real name, she was given the moniker Anson County Jane Doe. For convenience, I'll just call her Jane Doe. Investigators believe she died sometime in 2021. Notably, at the time of her death, she was wearing only a black bra and leggings. The official cause of death could not be determined. When attempting to identify the woman, authorities made what would become the most notable and perhaps most disturbing discovery of the case. Near the location where the remains were found, there was a trail camera set up in a hunting area to monitor deer. That camera had captured something. The footage showed a woman wearing the exact same clothing as found on Jane Doe's body. She was wandering through the forest on August 22, 2021. She first appeared on camera at 1:33 a.m., entering the frame from the right, but on the very next frame, taken just a couple of seconds later, she was already gone, suggesting she had been running. She appeared again later at 4:30 a.m. This time, she was struggling to move in the opposite direction, using a large stick for support. Investigators believe this woman is Anson County Jane Doe. While the reason for her solitary nighttime trek through the dense forest remained unclear, detectives now at least had a photo of her face. Forensic experts analyzed the image. It was noticeable that the woman's leggings were wet up to the knees, as was the bottom portion of her stick. This indicated she had crossed a body of water, most likely Culpeper Creek, which was nearby. Perhaps she slipped and injured her leg, which would explain the use of the stick. Some believe she was having a mental breakdown. Others suspect a darker scenario, that she was being held against her will in a remote location and, unable to fully dress, seized a chance to escape. Supporters of this theory believe she ultimately died at the hands of her captor, who managed to track her down. Whatever happened to this woman, it's chilling to watch this footage and imagine what her final hours must have been like, alone, wandering through the forest, lost in the pitch-black darkness. In February 2022, 6 months after this footage was captured, and a few months before the remains were discovered, rabbit hunters in the area found a backpack containing some money near that very location. Taking the money, they left the backpack in the woods. When news broke about Jane Doe's discovery, they reported the backpack. Unfortunately, the backpack still hasn't been found. Despite having a clear image of Jane Doe's face from the camera, this hasn't led to any new leads, at least not any the police have publicly acknowledged. Local law enforcement has been surprisingly tight-lipped, not releasing descriptions of the woman's remains, the cause of death, hair color, or even details about the missing backpack. No major news outlets have covered this case either. It seemed like insufficient effort was being made to solve it. One anonymous local resident noted, "I really hope I never go missing in Anson County." Combined with the eerie images, this secrecy has generated heightened internet interest in the story. With so many questions and so few answers, Jane Doe's identity has become a hot topic of discussion on YouTube, Reddit, and especially Facebook. Attempt to Locate is the name of a Facebook group with 138,000 members. People share information about unidentified deceased individuals and try to connect them with missing persons cases. When discussing images of Anson County Jane Doe, several users recalled one particular woman. Amber Ray Johnston, a 36-year-old from Mojave County, Arizona, went missing in August 2021. Amber was last seen in Bullhead City in August 2021. She left all her belongings in her apartment. Her boyfriend traveled to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina around the same time, and Amber was supposed to take a bus there on August 16th to meet him. In her last Facebook post on August 19th, she was live streaming directly from a bus before getting off at a rest stop. Since then, there's been no word from her, and it's unclear if she ever made it to Myrtle Beach. Interestingly, after her disappearance, someone used Amber's card to obtain food assistance. It was a woman, and when contacted, she said Amber's boyfriend had sold her the card. A few months before her disappearance, Amber had been using drugs and was quite paranoid. Her case remains unsolved, and the circumstances murky. The next story takes place in December 2016 when 32-year-old Rosemary was flying to the altar to marry her fiancé. The wedding venue was located in a rural area near Sao Paulo, Brazil, surrounded by open fields. Instead of arriving in a luxury car or horse-drawn carriage, Rosemary wanted to do something more spectacular and memorable, and she decided there was no better option than arriving by helicopter. Appearing at her wedding this way had been a childhood dream. She secretly booked the flight, hoping to surprise both guests and her groom, making her arrival unforgettable. Of the 300 wedding guests, only 6 knew about Rosemary's surprise. This was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life, but it became her last. On the wedding day, Rosemary, along with her brother Silvano and wedding photographer Nayla, who was 6 months pregnant, boarded the chartered Robinson R-44 helicopter. Despite poor visibility and weather conditions, pilot Peterson Pinheiro decided the flight could proceed as scheduled. The reason for his decision remains unclear. Perhaps he was under pressure to simply get to the destination, but the responsibility for the decision to fly rested with him alone. The flight promised to be challenging, there was no doubt about that, but the show had to go on, and besides, the route to the wedding venue was only 15 minutes of flight time. Even if the passengers got shaken up a bit, it would all be over before they had time to get scared. Apparently, that's what the pilot thought. The wedding photographer was filming the entire flight on video. The footage shows all the passengers looking happy, albeit slightly apprehensive. And looking at the thick fog outside, it's easy to understand why. As the flight continued, the worry on Rosemary and Silvano's faces became increasingly evident, especially when they hit turbulence and the helicopter started making strange sounds. Nayla turned the camera to show the thickness of the fog outside, and that's when disaster struck. The pilot urged everyone to stay calm, but in the blink of an eye, the helicopter crashed to the ground, killing all 4 passengers instantly. The camera kept recording, and 2 minutes later, voices could be heard in the background of locals approaching the crash site. The helicopter crashed in a wooded area next to a main road just a mile and a half from the destination. The exact cause of the crash remains unclear, but given the poor visibility, it's believed the pilot may have accidentally struck a tree hidden by the fog. However, no explanation could comfort the broken hearts. Rosemary's parents, guests, and of course her groom continued to patiently wait for her arrival, chatting and preparing for the celebration, unaware of the tragedy that had occurred. Eventually, the pastor learned of the crash and informed the groom. The groom, who knew nothing about his bride's surprise, was in shock and complete despair. Rosemary's story reminds us of the fragility of life, how quickly and unexpectedly it can be cut short, and how important it is to value safety and time spent with loved ones. On July 6, 2023, 2 students went missing from the northeastern state of Manipur in India. A 17-year-old Hindu girl from the Meitei people went to her tutor that morning and was later captured on surveillance camera riding a motorcycle with her friend, 20-year-old Hitchum, that evening. Both teenagers didn't return home, and their families reported them missing. For over 2 months, their whereabouts and condition remained unknown. The parents' families hoped their children would be found alive and unharmed. That was the case until late September, when this photo spread across social media. The image shows both missing students sitting together in a wooded area under open sky. The girl is wearing a mask and looking directly at the camera with a frightened expression, while the boy's gaze is averted and appears empty. Armed people can be seen in the background. These are their captors, members of the rival Christian Kuki community. Likely at gunpoint, they forcibly dragged the 2 students into one of their trucks. In May 2023, violence erupted between the Meitei people, who make up the majority of residents in Manipur's Imphal Valley, and the tribal Kuki community living in the hills. The Kuki people had long complained of feeling marginalized and oppressed by the Meitei, who have greater influence over the state government. Tensions reached a peak when the Meitei demanded official tribal status, which would give them the right to buy land and settle in areas where the Kuki predominantly live. To date, the conflict has resulted in about 200 deaths. More than 1,000 have been injured, 60,000 have been forced from their homes. It's safe to say brutal acts have been committed by both sides. However, in this case, Kuki militants appear to have taken out their anger on 2 innocent teenagers and decided to use them to carry out an act of intimidation. By the time this image appeared online, the conflict had escalated so much that a curfew and internet shutdown were imposed. Another shutdown was implemented immediately after this photo was published. Many had hoped that peace negotiations could lead to the safe release of the young people. But when internet service resumed on September 25th, a second photograph began circulating online. It showed the bodies of the two students lying in a pit. They were wearing the same clothes as in the first image, and it's believed they were executed shortly after the first photo was taken. People were shocked by these images. On October 1st, 2023, 4 adults were arrested in connection with the murder of these students, 2 men and 2 women. If found guilty, they faced the death penalty for taking the lives of 2 young innocent students who found themselves at the epicenter of a conflict they didn't start and didn't participate in. On November 22, 2003, at 4 p.m., 22-year-old student Drew Sodin finished her shift at Victoria's Secret, where she worked at the Columbia Mall in Grand Forks, North Dakota. After work, she spent another hour walking around the mall looking for a new purse. This surveillance footage from a store shows her making a purchase. These were the last images of Drew Sodin captured while she was alive. Immediately after leaving the store, Drew headed to her car parked in the mall parking lot. On the way, she was talking on the phone with her boyfriend, Chris Lang. They talked for only 4 minutes, and suddenly Chris heard Drew say a few words, as if addressing someone else. Then, the call disconnected. According to Chris, Drew's voice didn't sound worried or scared. He assumed the connection had simply dropped. 3 hours later, at 7:42 p.m., Chris received another call from Drew's number. He answered, but only heard noise and the sounds of buttons being pressed on the line. According to police, this call was made somewhere near Fisher, Minnesota. When Drew didn't show up for work for her next shift, her loved ones became concerned. Law enforcement was notified, and an investigation into the young woman's disappearance began. Soon, Drew's car was found in the same spot where she had left it in the mall parking lot. Strangely, a knife sheath was found on one of the front seats, indicating that upon opening the car, she probably encountered someone who, pulling out a knife, ordered her to get into his vehicle. On December 1st, just over a week after her disappearance, detectives investigating Drew's case paid a visit to a man from Minnesota with a criminal past. 50-year-old Alfonso Rodriguez, a registered sex offender, was living with his mother in Crookston, just 12 miles from Fisher. He had been released from prison less than 7 months earlier, having served his 23-year sentence for multiple sexual assaults. Investigators questioned Alfonso about Drew's disappearance, and he admitted he had indeed been near the Columbia Mall on the day she vanished, but he supposedly had an alibi. At the moment Drew's call was disconnected, Alfonso was at the mall's movie theater watching the film Once Upon a Time in Mexico. But there were problems with this alibi. The thing is, the film Once Upon a Time in Mexico wasn't showing at the mall's theater on November 22nd. In fact, it wasn't playing anywhere in Grand Forks. Police also found receipts in Alfonso's wallet for a knife he purchased at a store near the mall on November 22nd. This same knife was found in his car, which reeked of cleaning solution. A woman's boot and blood were also found in his car. Both belonged to Drew. On April 17, 2004, 5.5 agonizing months after her disappearance, Drew's body was finally discovered west of Crookston, Minnesota. It was hidden in a drainage ditch. Her hands were bound behind her back. Her body showed signs of being struck with a sharp object, and there were signs of strangulation. It's believed the plastic bag found nearby had been placed over her head. The exact cause of death was never determined. It could have been the knife wounds, possibly suffocation from the bag, or Alfonso may have simply left her to die. On top of everything else, Alfonso made one fatal mistake. He forcibly took Drew from the mall parking lot in North Dakota, but took her life in Minnesota. This meant the crime occurred across state lines, making it a federal case. Neither North Dakota nor Minnesota had the death penalty, but federal cases allowed for capital punishment. Thus, instead of life imprisonment, Alfonso now faced a swift death. His case became the first death penalty case tried in North Dakota in an entire century. After Alfonso was found guilty of taking Drew's life on February 8, 2006, he was officially sentenced to death. However, this decision was overturned on May 18, 2023, when the sentence was commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.